Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, a warning to Beijing. President Trump threatening to hike tariffs on China to 200%. What he's demanding and what's in a new partnership with South Korea he's announcing. Mariotsu at the White House. Israel calls an airstrike in the Gaza Strip a mishap after several journalists are tragically killed. Meanwhile, President Trump says he believes the war in Gaza will soon end. Jason Perry with the update. President Trump taking executive action aiming to end cashless bail and crack down on flag burning. What changes we could see in the coming days? Jack Bradley reports. President Trump says Chicago could be next for a federal crime crackdown, but he'd like to see the Illinois governor request his help. Jason Blair has more on that and how Governor J.B. Pritzker responds. Illegal immigrant Abrego Garcia surrenders to authorities in Baltimore. He's facing possible deportation to the African country of Uganda, what federal officials and his lawyer are saying.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. In the Middle East, Israeli forces launched 2 strikes on a hospital in the Gaza Strip, killing multiple civilians, including several journalists. Meanwhile, President Trump says he thinks the war in the Gaza Strip will end in 2 to 3 weeks. NTD's Jason Perry has the Middle East update.
On Monday, rescue workers responded to the aftermath of an Israeli airstrike on a hospital in the Gaza Strip, when Israeli forces suddenly struck the same area again. Al Jazeera, Reuters, and the Associated Press confirmed that their journalists and freelancers were among the 5 journalists who were killed in the strikes. The Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, said they opened an immediate investigation into the incident.
We are aware of reports that harm was caused to civilians, including journalists. Reporting from an active war zone carries immense risk, especially in a war with a terrorist organization such as Hamas, who cynically hides behind the civilian population. As always, we will present our findings as transparently as possible.
And afterwards, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a post on X, Israel deeply regrets the tragic mishap that occurred today at the Nasser Hospital in Gaza. Israel's strike on the hospital received international criticism, including comments from France and the United Nations, which condemned the strikes. Meanwhile, President Trump on Monday said the war in the Gaza Strip could soon be over.
It's a terrible situation over there, terrible, terrible situation. But it's coming to a head, it's coming to an end. I think within the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to have pretty good conclusive ending.
And the situation between Israel and the Hezbollah terrorist group in Lebanon could be ending soon as well. The Lebanese government said they're planning to disarm the Iran-backed group in Lebanon by the end of the year. Israel said on Monday that they were, quote, ready to support Lebanon in its efforts to disarm Hezbollah. Israel also said that if Lebanon takes the necessary steps to disarm Hezbollah, then Israel would begin a phased reduction of Israeli troops in Lebanon, and that would be coordinated with a U.S.-led security mechanism. The United States is also mediating talks between Israel and Syria. U.S. envoy Thomas Barrack met with Syria's leader in Damascus on Monday. They previously discussed a possible security agreement with Israel for southern Syria. Jason Perry, NTD News.
President Trump meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung today, unveiling plans to revive America's shipbuilding industry and launching a joint energy project in Alaska. Trump also issues new warnings to China over trade and national security. NTD's Mariotsu has more from the White House.
We're going to be buying ships from South Korea.
President Trump today meeting with South Korean President Lee less than a month after South Korea proposed a $150 billion investment plan called Make American Shipbuilding Great Again.
They build them very well in South Korea, but we're also going to have them make ships here with our people, using our people. And we're going to go back into the shipbuilding business again, can take a look at World War II in particular, where we were doing virtually a ship a day.
South Korea's finance minister saying in July that the goal of this project is to help rebuild America's shipbuilding industry by using Korea's expertise in the sector. Meanwhile, President Trump is also announcing a joint energy venture in Alaska.
You need oil and we have it.
Criticizing wind and solar, saying they don't work and take up valuable farmland.
God was very good to us. He gave us the greatest. We didn't use it. We have more oil and gas and coal and energy than any other country in the world by far.
The president says that the U.S. will supply South Korea with oil from Alaska and that Japan is also, quote, very strongly involved.
You know, it seems like quite far away, Alaska, but actually it's right up the little ocean, right up the little Pacific Ocean.
And on China, President Trump is saying that China controls a monopoly on magnets, which are crucial for aircraft parts and national security.
But we have a much more powerful thing, that's tariffs. If we want to put 100%, 200% tariffs on, we wouldn't do any business with China. And, you know, it would be okay, too, if we had to.
The president says that the U.S. held back Boeing jet parts from China until China agreed to supply the U.S. with magnets.
You know, they had 200 jets that didn't fly. I sent them all of the parts so their planes can fly. But the magnet situation, we have tremendous power over them, and they have some power over us.
Talk about shipbuilding and trade is happening amid a larger conversation about peace on the Korean Peninsula.
And I would like to ask for your role in establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I look forward to your meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un. I hope that you will usher in a new era of peace on the Korean Peninsula.
I will do that, and we'll have talks. He'd like to meet with me.
With President Lee saying that he believes President Trump is the only world leader who has been able to end global wars. Reporting from the White House, Mariotsu, NTD News.
President Trump signs executive orders aiming to end cashless bail across the country and increase penalties for burning the American flag. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
When somebody kills somebody, they go in, don't worry about it, no cash, come back in a couple of months, we'll give you a trial. You never see the person again.
President Trump signing multiple executive orders on Monday aiming to end cashless bail. One order seeks to revoke federal funding to states that have cashless bail. Another ends cashless bail in Washington, D.C., and those arrested in D.C. will now be held in federal custody rather than city jail.
All over the country, cashless bail, we're ending it, but we're starting by ending it in D.C., and that we have the right to do through federalization.
Cashless bail allows suspects charged with crimes to be released from jail without posting bail. Now, certain crimes are exempt from this, like murder or armed assault, but some say bail disadvantages the poor, who can't afford it and may lose their jobs while waiting for trial behind bars. But others say that it's necessary because without posting bail, there's no incentive for suspects to return to court, as bail money is refunded after the case concludes.
Because this is what bail is. Remember, it's a guarantee that you will show up for court. It's your pledge through money that you will go through the legal system. And without that cash bail, you have no reason to participate. You can just stay hidden and evade.
In 2023, Illinois became the only state to eliminate cash bail across the board. Other states like New Jersey, New York, and New Mexico have eliminated cash bail for certain misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. And at the same time, President Trump signed another executive order, cracking down on those that burn the American flag. It directs the Attorney General Pam Bondi to prosecute those found desecrating the flag. It also directs the State Department and Homeland Security to deny and revoke visas, resident permits, or any other immigration benefits to those convicted of defacing the flag.
If you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail, no early exits, no nothing, and you will see flag burning stopping immediately.
Burning the American flag was outlawed in 1968 after people were burning the flag in protest of the Vietnam War. But just 20 years later, the Supreme Court overturned that law in a 5-4 ruling, declaring the act of flag desecration as a protected symbol of free speech. Protesters burned American flags most recently in the Los Angeles riots in June after Trump ordered the National Guard to the region. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Should burning the American flag be protected under the First Amendment? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Do you think flag burning should be legal?
Absolutely not. That is asinine. We live in America, and that flag stands for what we have, and it should not be legal.
There's other means to protest if you have differences for whatever it is. That's really all it is, just respect.
I think we have to maintain free speech and people have to have a right to express themselves. Having said that, is it ethically and morally right when you stand here around all these monuments for people who fought for our freedom? That makes it upsetting, but I don't think illegal.
For somebody to burn flags, I think it should be considered a criminal act. For all the men and women who, like myself, I followed in their footsteps, who signed a piece of paper to say I'm willing to die for people who hate me, people who love me, people who will never know anything about me. My dad did the same thing.
My dad was a Marine in World War II. I have his flag. I have my grandfather's flag from World War I. I don't think the people that are doing that are educated enough on the history of the country and the flag.
In the past couple of years, we've seen protests turning into violence, and then there are people who are trying to express their anger by burning the American flag. And then some people are saying that, we're perhaps being too lenient on that. What are your thoughts on it?
I think I think it's their right. I think if it keeps it from breaking out in other violence in protests, then that might be the concession we have to make.
That should not be allowed, and if you're going to do that, you're going to suffer the consequences.
I don't think someone should be criminalized for it. I think it's just kind of a sticky road to travel on, really, because you can preach what you want because of our First Amendment, but I think there are moral obligations behind it.
I don't like punishing people who live in a free country. However, once again, give me a good reason why you're burning the flag. Put them somewhere where they got to go somewhere where they're oppressed by a nation besides this one, and then tell me how you feel about that flag.
And I understand people want their freedom of speech, but we don't burn the flag that all these memorials represent, right? Vietnam, they fought for their freedom, and that's the flag. So we don't burn the flag. If you don't like it, get out of this country, go to a country that you like then.
President Trump says Chicago could be the next city for federal efforts to reduce crime, similar to what's happening in Washington, D.C. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the latest updates on the clampdown on crime by the federal government.
They need help badly. Chicago desperately needs help.
From the Oval Office, President Trump says that he would be able to reduce crime in Chicago similar to Washington, D.C. However, with Chicago, he says he would rather go in after the governor requests it.
I don't like to go in and do it and then have somebody stand up and say what a great job he's doing on crime. And we don't want the military in our state.
However, it doesn't look like Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker will be asking anytime soon.
There is no emergency in Chicago that calls for armed military intervention. What President Trump is doing is unprecedented and unwarranted.
In Washington, D.C., some National Guard troops were spotted carrying weapons on Sunday. This is after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave the approval on Friday.
Get out of our neighborhood!
Also on Sunday, a group was seen protesting against federal law enforcement and D.C. police while they were conducting a raid. Another group of protesters on Sunday were seen banging pots and pans in a high crime area of D.C. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt posted on X that since President Trump's initiative in Washington, violent crime is down 32%. Carjackings are down 86%, homicides are down 60%, and robberies are down 47%. Attorney General Pam Bondi says that 1,007 arrests have been made and 111 guns seized in D.C. since August 7th. The White House also touted that there have been no murders in Washington, D.C. for 11 days, according to statistics by the Washington, D.C. Police Department.
But Washington, D.C. is a very safe city right now. People are going out to dinner. Restaurants are opening. Restaurants that were going to close are now going to stay open.
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up, Venezuelan regime leader Nicolas Maduro orders a national enlistment of civilians into the militias, responding to the U.S. military presence in the region. He's also touting close ties to the Chinese Communist regime. Luis Martinez reports. A demographics expert said if the census is changed to exclude non-citizens, Republicans would benefit. But he says President Trump can't dictate that change. Hear his conversation with Arlene Richards. And wildfires are raging in Northern California's wine country and Central Oregon. Thousands of homes are at risk as firefighters battle the flames in dangerous conditions. Christina Corona brings us the update when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In a case attracting national attention, ICE detained Salvadoran national Kilmar Abrego Garcia after he turns himself in. He's accused of human smuggling and other crimes and faces possible deportation. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Many are following the case of illegal immigrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's now facing possible deportation to the African country of Uganda.
We've got him under control. He will no longer terrorize our country. He's currently charged with human smuggling, including children. The guy needs to be in prison. He doesn't need to be on the streets.
But on Monday, a judge said she wants to keep Abrego Garcia in the U.S. while she can consider whether officials are violating his due process rights. Abrego Garcia recently rejected a plea deal in which he's accused of domestic violence and human smuggling in the United States. The Department of Homeland Security says that in 2019, Abrego Garcia was found with 2 alleged MS-13 gang members. The 30-year-old was brought back to the U.S. in June after he was deported to his native El Salvador earlier in the year.
I found out how the community has supported me, embraced me with so much love and solidarity, and from day one.
Abrego Garcia has denied the allegations against him and denies that he's a member of MS-13, which the U.S. has labeled a terrorist criminal organization. After Abrego Garcia rejected the plea deal, in which he would have been deported to Costa Rica, he agreed to surrender to immigration authorities in Baltimore.
Through a system of liberal courts, he's doing things, but no, we have that under control.
Protesters are demanding his freedom, and his lawyer claims prosecutors are unfairly coercing Abrego Garcia after he rejected the initial plea deal.
Mr. Abrego Garcia has filed a new lawsuit in the Federal District Court for the District of Maryland, challenging his current confinement and challenging deportation to Uganda or to any other country unless and until he's had a fair trial.
White House Border Czar Tom Homan expects Abrego Garcia to be deported and says he can still briefly spend time with his family in the U.S. David Lamb, NTD News.
And with Abrego Garcia now set for deportation and his lawyers trying to block the move, what's next? And why is Abrego Garcia still drawing national attention? We'll discuss with our panel, Jared Bernstein and Aaron Evans, tonight on Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern. The Maduro regime in Venezuela ordered a national enlistment process of civilian volunteers into the regime's militias in response to U.S. military presence in the region.
El patriotismo, la vergüenza y el honor de la entrega en sacrificio por la paz.
Nicolás Maduro, the leader of the Venezuelan regime, has ordered a nationwide enlistment process of the civilian population into militias. Some 4.5 million civilians with no military training have allegedly already been deployed in support of the regime's armed forces in response to the deployment of 3 U.S. destroyers and 4,000 Marines to the South Caribbean Sea to combat cartel operations in Latin America.
I have called for at the military barracks, military units, central public squares, Bolivar squares, and at the headquarters of the 15,751 popular bases for integral defense, for a process of national enlistment of all militia forces, of the entire Bolivarian national militia.
Nicolás Maduro has also touted his close relationships with the Chinese Communist Party. During an official event last week, Maduro claimed to have received as a gift a satellite phone from the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, which he allegedly uses to communicate with him frequently.
Yo me comunico por satélite con este. Ni hao, ni hao.
Nicolás Maduro has been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice for narco-terrorism and drug trafficking. The Department of Justice is also offering a $50 million reward for information leading to the capture of Nicolás Maduro, the highest ever ransom offered by the DOJ for an indicted criminal.
Look, I think all the steps that the administration has taken indicate that President Trump is not happy with the illegitimate regime of Nicolás Maduro. There is a legitimate government that's waiting to take, power, which Nicolás Maduro the narco trafficker, the head of a terrorist organization, is actually holding Venezuela, for ransom.
It is important to note the United States has only indicted 3 foreign heads of state. Manuel Antonio Noriega of Panama, who was captured by the United States during Operation Just Cause in January of 1990. Juan Orlando Hernandez, former president of Honduras, who was extradited to the United States in 2024 after leaving office, and Nicolás Maduro of the Venezuelan regime. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
President Trump recently tasked the Commerce Department with finding a way to exclude illegal immigrants from the population count for the next census. NTD's Arlene Richards spoke to an expert who said if the change is successful, it could benefit Republicans.
President Trump recently directed the Department of Commerce to begin work on a new U.S. census that excludes illegal immigrants from the population count. An expert from a national demographics company said Trump can't dictate that change.
It's one thing for the president to say he wants to do something. It's another to come up with how that would be done. So, the president doesn't have the authority to do it just by dictate.
Douglas Johnson, a demographics expert who specializes in election district plans, said there would have to be a law passed or a court case won in order for the president to get what he wants. Trump's directive came in the midst of the redistricting battle in Texas before the map was eventually approved. Johnson said if illegal immigrants were excluded from the next census, Republicans would benefit.
Probably lose one seat each would be California, Illinois, New York, and possibly Rhode Island. So all those are heavily Democratic states, obviously. The wins are less clear, but probably Ohio, maybe Minnesota, and probably Utah. So Minnesota would probably be a Democratic state would lose a seat to a Democratic state, but the other two, Ohio and Utah, would likely be Democratic states losing a seat to a Republican state.
With the recent battle over redrawing congressional maps in Texas and California, it's unclear whether the president is hoping to make the change before the 2026 midterms. Johnson said it's extremely unlikely.
Maybe there could be some reconsideration of 2020 data if he could get a friendly court ruling to allow that, but that would likely not kick in until 2028.
To watch the complete interview, including Johnson's views on impacts to federal funding and errors in the 2020 census, go to our website at ntd.com. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Wildfires are raging in California's Napa Valley and across parts of Oregon. In California, the Picket Fire is threatening homes and vineyards, while in Oregon, the Flat Fire has destroyed homes and forced over 1,000 residents to evacuate. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
In Napa County, California, the Picket Fire has scorched more than 6,800 acres since breaking out last Thursday. The blaze is threatening about 500 structures in an area known for its wineries and hot springs. Roughly 150 residents have been ordered to evacuate, while another 360 are under warnings near Etna Springs and Pope Valley. Officials say the fire is 13% contained. Crews are battling difficult conditions in rugged terrain, with some firefighters flown in and helicopters working overnight, according to CAL FIRE. Officials say challenges are on the steeper sections of the fire, where rolling material could spark new flames.
Holding is going to be an issue with the potential for rollout in there. Again, with how steep it is, there's still a threat for rolling material to ignite fire below should it come rolling out of the containment area. Crews are actively engaged in there, continuing to mop up, patrol, strengthen, and improve all those areas.
The Bay Area District has also issued an air quality advisory through Wednesday, warning of potentially unhealthy smoke in Napa, Sonoma, and Solano counties. Crews are also putting protective equipment in place around local vineyards. Meanwhile, in Oregon, the Flat Fire has burned nearly 22,000 acres across Jefferson and Deschutes counties. At least 10 structures, including 4 homes, have been destroyed. About 4,000 homes remain under evacuation notices as crews fight to gain control, with containment at just 5%. The American Red Cross has opened shelters to help displaced families. The cause of the fire remains under investigation. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, what are some key takeaways from President Trump's meeting today with the president of South Korea? And where are U.S.-South Korea relations heading amid potential threats from China and North Korea? Foreign policy and national security analyst Armin Kurdian joins us for analysis when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump met with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung at the White House today. The two leaders talked trade, troops, and engaging North Korea. Joining us now to discuss the key takeaways from today's meeting is foreign policy and national security analyst Armin Kurdian. He's also a retired U.S. Navy captain. Armin, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here now ahead of the meeting. President Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "What is going on in South Korea seems like a purge or revolution. We can't have that and do business there." But during the meeting, it seemed quite warm between the two leaders. What's your main takeaways from today's summit?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Tiffany. So I think the issues regarding the purges or the raids on the particular church, I think got cleared up pretty quickly. They were connected to the ousted previous president of South Korea, who tried to declare martial law a couple of times. So there were some looking discussions on there. And ultimately, it ended up not being an issue. So, excuse me. Ultimately, ended up not being an issue. The good news is that U.S. and South Korea have $242 billion in trade between the two countries, and that number has been increasing significantly. So that is a big part of the discussion there today, as well as peace and meetings with Kim Jong-un in the North. The North hasn't necessarily responded yet to Trump's entreaties, but Donald Trump recognizes the importance of South Korea as an economic and as a military partner. So I think this meeting was very, very good, and the relationship will continue to grow stronger.
A lot to unpack here for sure. As you mentioned, trade was high on the agenda today, with South Korea's lead touting a $150 billion offer to make American shipbuilding great again. It's part of the trade deal struck last month and would include construction, training, and maintenance. As a retired Navy captain, what do you make of this package?
Well, South Korea knows something about building ships when you consider where they are. I mean, they are on a peninsula. They're the only land border they share is with the hostile neighbor to the north. So they have been a seafaring nation for thousands of years. So the U.S. understands it needs to get much better at building ships and building a merchant fleet as well. But in the meantime, South Korea can build them fast, they can build them quickly, and they can build lots of them. So partnership there would significantly strengthen not only America's economic security, but frankly our national security by improving and strengthening lines of logistics across the ocean, which covers nearly 70% of the Earth's surface. So there's that maritime side is very, very important. And as for military ships, the U.S. has been known to sell military vessels and military equipment to South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and those other Asian nations in the Indo-PACOM region that are going to be vital allies to us in case there is any kind of conflict with China. So strengthen that military cooperation and those continued exercises that we have with them, both the military side and on the logistics side, must continue to strengthen.
And as you mentioned, another big topic was North Korea. South Korea's Lee encouraging Trump to engage with North Korea as a peacemaker, even suggesting that he build a real estate complex there. Now, Trump said he'd like to meet with Kim Jong-un this year. What are you anticipating on that front, given North Korea has been more aggressive and Kim has ignored Trump's calls for direct diplomacy this year?
Ultimately, I think the North will want to meet with the president somewhere because from a public relations standpoint for the North Korean regime, it's simply something that's too valuable to ignore. They did it previously, and the North is very excited. You remember when I think it was Kim Jong or Kim Jong-il got a picture, I think it was Il, with President Bill Clinton. It was very, very excited about it, and they publicized it everywhere. Just a photograph. It wasn't even a real meeting. So the North will meet with the president. Whether or not anything actually comes of it remains to be seen. The North will continue to remain a hostile state because, frankly, the entire country is built on a cult of personality across the entirety of Kim Jong-un's family and ultimately whoever is going to succeed him as president and prime minister and dictator of North Korea. 40% of their GDP goes into military equipment and their defense, as well as nuclear weapons. I think the biggest concern right now for the United States is North Korea's surge to building ballistic missiles, which are capable of going basically all the way across the world and hitting the continental United States. which is basically creating our impetus to implement some measure of Golden Dome. You're not going to be able to do it all at once, but a missile defense against North Korea to take out that threat is going to be vital to our national security.
And on that note, what is South Korea's relationship with North Korea and China? For example, while Lee is here, he also sent a delegation to China calling for normalization of ties between the two. Could we see South Korea move closer to China and away from the U.S.?
Well, remember, they live there. A lot of these countries, which we look to as allies, the Philippines, Japan, and the other Asian nations, they live in that part of the world. So they need to have some measure of a good relationship with China, even if it's just based on economic trade. From a military standpoint, it's going to be vital, as in our discussions, in case there is any kind of Indo-PACOM conflict, that South Korea be a part of the coalition, basically stop China, because frankly, if China can then influence military operations in that region of the world and push out the U.S., then South Korea is going to be very, very isolated, and that is not somewhere they want to be, and potentially forcibly reintegrated with the North on terms that are not their own. But on an economic standpoint, economy builds peace, it builds trade, it builds relationship, it builds understanding. So it makes perfect sense for China and South Korea to build economic ties, and perhaps through that kind of economic cooperation, provide some measure of diffusion to any tensions that might exist in that part of the world.
And given all of that, what does all of this mean for U.S.-South Korea relations going forward?
Ultimately, it needs to remain strong. It needs to remain bold. The U.S. has 28,500 troops in that nation. I would not recommend reducing that number at this point, because they're not just there, frankly, to defend South Korea from North Korea, although it would be nice if perhaps some of the other nations around the world provide additional forces as well. There's international contingents there, but the U.S. has definitely got the massive lion's share to do that. Those troops are there to help defend, perhaps, if they need to rapidly respond to other parts of the world in that region, as well as U.S. equipment, maritime prepositioning ships to basically quickly send vehicles or other types of war material where they need to go. So it is a very strategic location. It is a vital U.S. national interest to maintain that kind of relationship and basically continue to be able to influence issues and other things of U.S. interest in that part of the world, as it is just as much with the U.S. In Europe and in the Southern Hemisphere.
Well, Armin Kurdian, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Coming up in baseball is a record-breaking season by a catcher, enough to unseat Aaron Judge for MVP. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in tennis, as the first round of the U.S. Open is underway, and already we've had a pair of upsets in both the men's and women's.
Yes, sixth-ranked American Madison Keys was upset this afternoon in 3 sets by 82nd-ranked Renata Zazura. Now, Keys won the Australian Open just a few months ago, actually all the way back in January. She was a finalist here at the U.S. Open back in 2017, so quite an upset on the women's side. Now, on the men's side, we had a big one last night under some unusual circumstances. Former U.S. Open champion Daniel Medvedev lost to 51st-ranked Benjamin Bonzi. Now, the unusual part about this was that the match was delayed for about 6 minutes at match point in the third set when a cameraman actually came onto the court, apparently to get a better shot. Now, the umpire ordered him back to his seat and then awarded Bonzi another first serve after hitting his first serve into the net. Now, it was unclear on TV, actually when he came onto the court, was it while he was serving or not, but allowing Bonzi another first serve is within the umpire's discretion. But Medvedev was not happy about it. He disagreed with the umpire for quite a while. Then the crowd really got into it with Medvedev. Finally, when the cheering and booing stopped, Bonzi served again. But Medvedev ended up saving match point winning that third set, then came back to win the third set, won the fourth set, and came all the way to the fifth set before Bonzi recovered to win the match there to upset the former U.S. Open champion. And by the way, the cameraman was escorted out of the stadium and his credentials were revoked. So it was quite a scene last night there, Tiff. You never know what you're going to see when you go to a tennis match, I guess, these days.
But did he get the shot before he was dragged off the field?
Well, the match play didn't get to happen, unfortunately, for him. So maybe someone else. We all got a good shot of the camera guy, I guess. So it was a memorable time, right?
I feel like looking at those pictures, you can tell how hot it is in New York right now. Very hot. On that note, looking at tonight's U.S. Open schedule, because it does continue, what matches are standing out to you?
All right, yeah, on the men's side tonight, we've got Carlos Alcaraz playing his first round match against 67th ranked American Riley Opelka. Now, Alcaraz won this event in 2022. Last year, though, he was bumped in the second round. Alcaraz, though, second-ranked player in the world. Now, already seventh-ranked Novak Djokovic won his first-round match yesterday. Top-ranked Jannik Sinner plays his first-round match tomorrow. They're going to do the first round from Sunday all the way through Tuesday. Now, on the women's side tonight, 45-year-old Venus Williams plays tonight against 13th-ranked Karolina Muchova. That's coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Williams won this event all the way back in 2000 and again in 2001. She was actually a finalist there all the way back in 1997. She will be the oldest singles player here on court when she steps on court tonight since 1981. Now, as far as favorites are concerned, on the women's side, you probably have number one ranked Aryna Sabalenka, who won her opener yesterday. Tomorrow, we've got reigning Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek will be playing in the afternoon. And then tomorrow night, third-ranked Coco Gauff plays her opener. Those three have actually combined to win the last 3 U.S. Opens on the women's side. So, the favorites.
Probably a lot of eyeballs tonight. Moving to NFL news, though, the Washington Commanders have reportedly agreed to a contract extension with Pro Bowl receiver Terry McLaurin. What does he bring to this team?
Yeah, he is their top receiver, brings a lot of attention from the opposing defense. He's gotten more than 1,000 yards receiving each of the last 5 seasons, twice being a Pro Bowl selection in there. Now, this deal was for a reported 3 years, worth $96 million. $30 million of it guaranteed. Now that puts him in a tie for 6th place among receivers as far as highest paid there. Now, I'm sure the Commanders were eager to get a deal done right now with him because they're really in a window of opportunity as far as their salary cap goes, with star quarterback Jaden Daniels still in that rookie contract, which pays him between like $8 and $12 million still for a few more years. After that, it's probably going to jump to 40 or 50 million a year, given how good he is. Now, the NFL season starts next week, Tiff, and the Commanders actually start, Sunday, September 7th, so 2 weeks from yesterday, against the New York Giants. So good for them to get their top receiver locked up now. Before the season starts, always important to have your best players, right?
You'll have another sport to focus on. Looking at baseball news, though, Mariners catcher Raleigh hit his 48th and 49th home runs last night to set the single-season record for catchers. Where do you think he ranks in the MVP race?
You know, I think he's made up a lot of ground lately in the American League anyway, on Aaron Judge. In fact, Judge's flexor strain has really kind of almost paused his season the last 3 or 4 weeks. You know, he was on the injured list. Now he's come back as the designated hitter. I would say it's almost a toss-up at this point. And if Raleigh keeps hitting home runs at this pace, you mentioned he's at 49, he's on pace for 60. That gives him a really good chance. Now, for a catcher, of course, to do that would be incredible. Like you said, he's already got the catcher's record. There's a reason you would mention a catcher's record instead of an infielder's record or an outfielder's record. It's so hard on the knees, squatting there day in and day out all game long. Now, Raleigh, like I said, leads the American League with 49 home runs and 106 RBIs. Judge, though, leads the league in batting average, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, total bases runs, a whole bunch of other categories. And as far as teams going, because that's part of the MVP formulas too, their teams have nearly identical records. Yankees just a half game ahead of them. Now, for Raleigh, probably his worst statistic here is his .247 batting average, one of the lowest, actually. One of the lower ones for an MVP ever to get. But I think if he does get to 60 home runs, that will be overlooked. So in about 30 games, we will see. I do not have a vote, unfortunately, in the MVP race. But if he gets to 60, it'd be tough to see anyone top him. Unless Judge gets to 60, but he's at 40 right now. So we'll see.
Look at all those stats.
Yeah, all those stats, all right?
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.